And that's a like nice decision to to shift to so like the way we all shift because of our career to work to
Yeah,
one place, yeah, that's
true. I did the same thing. I made a decision and shifted to Manali to focus on my career,
all right,
which is
all
ultra
right.
running
which
and
is
trail
running,
running, luckily.
which is running.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
actually, we are very lucky to see your photos. It's inspiring and also it's very beautiful because of the terrain and
Yeah, I know. It's work. I must tell you, it's work getting these photos. It's not that it's planning and work and yeah. It's like
yeah.
one photo is like a couple of days of work,
Wow. Yeah,
but
but it
it's
reflects
worth
there.
it.
It's really nice photos and it's really
Yeah,
inspiring. Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoy it. Yeah, thank you. That's the aim. So yeah. So should we get
So
started?
Yeah.
do you have
Start.
a photographer or you are doing it by yourself?
No, so mostly I'm lucky to in Manali. It's we had a time in. I'll save this for the call for the conversation
Okay,
anyway.
okay, okay. Yep.
Yeah,
I think let's RK, if you allow, let's start this
Yeah,
session.
yeah, sure.
I
We
think.
can go ahead. You can go ahead. All the best,
Okay.
Subhash. And Kieren.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Uh,
I
so
think
to keep the good evening everyone. Today we have Kieren D'Souza, one of uh, the best or topmost runners, ultra runners in India, and we are very lucky to have you here, Kieren. And
Thank you.
so we will be taking help of Ilayaraja to just keep everybody muted and maybe switch off the videos so that we don't face the bandwidth issues. So the agenda is we have structured it around 4 sessions. The initial one will be talking about Kairan's running career, and that's really fantastic. And not only for us, maybe for our coming generations, for our kids. Maybe if they have such a passion, how they should be shaping their career. So that's what something we may be having as a takeaway. That's the first one. Maybe then the next thing, we all always aim to do a ultra race or ultra trail race, being a runner. So how to prepare for that? That's a second agenda. And then also Kieren has participated in Oman by UTMB, and so his experience in that will be helpful for us. And also I'm thinking most of us will be trying to do Oman by UTMB any distance, and some of us have already done that. So that's going to be a really interesting session for us. Then the fourth one is to have a Q&A session. We have already shared some of the questions uh, for Kieren to be prepared. Then that itself is a bit exhaustive, but anyway, we will have an open session also. Yeah. So over to Kieren without losing much time. Yeah. Thank you,
All
Kieren.
right. All right. Firstly, thank you so much, Subhash, and everyone from the group for having me over. And like we greet in Manali, it's like Namaste Ji. So thank you so much for having me over here, and it's pretty exciting to talk to all of you. And it's nice to when I was in Oman last year and for the race, it was nice to meet so many guys running the race from India who are living in Oman. So and that's how I guess we met, right, Subhash? So pretty grateful for that as well. Uh, so yeah, I'll get started as Subhash mentioned with a little bit about myself. In case you guys if you probably don't know, and I'll just give you a little history about how I started and how I've gotten into how I reached here where I am today. So for me, running specifically as a sport started in 2010. So I've been pretty much running for 10 years now, and I started out regularly. I started with a 10K. I did a 21K, but and at that time when I did in 2010, I had zero clue about running. I had, didn't have access to internet, no smartphones. all I knew about was from the little bit of newspapers or a little bit from books that I read. So very early on, I started reading a lot about. I came across things like ultra running, and I came across a race in Bangalore called the Bangalore Ultra. Getting quite a few. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. I don't think it's been organized for 1 or 2 years now, but it's one of the oldest like ultra races in India. Like I think 2008 or 9 is when they started, if I'm not mistaken. So I started with that. I did a 21K, and in 2012 I did my first 100K. So from 2010 to 2012, I jumped from a 10 to a 21, and then straight to a 100. I didn't do a 42, I didn't do a 50, I didn't do any of those distances in between. For me, it was just out of interest mainly because I was in college, and at that time I used to travel from Bangalore to Mysore sometimes, and to move to look around places and stuff. And Bangalore Mysore is like about 100 150. So in my head I was like, man, people are actually running this kind of mileage in one go, right? So that that just made me very intrigued about the fact that you can actually run that much, and it just spiked some interest in me, right? So that's how I went and attempted a 100K. I had zero knowledge about training. I had zero knowledge about racing. I had zero knowledge about fueling. I had no clue, mainly because I was very new in the sport. I was not part of any running group. I was just a guy in college, running on my own. And I was this weirdo in college, basically. Every morning I'd be out running. Who likes running, right? In college, I should be sitting and partying and drinking, but that was not my scene. So yeah, so the first 100K was probably one of the biggest learnings for me. Since then, I think like almost all of us in the group here, right? We Once you start running, the longer you start running, the more you just it's like a drug. You just want to run more and more and more and more. So that's pretty much what happened to me. I ran 100K the year later in Uti. Uh, I think I ran a couple of races between 2013 and 14 again. In India, at that time, the most popular race, even probably now in the ultra running space, one of the most famous races in India and one of the most cruelest races, that's how they brand themselves, is La Ultra. So naturally, I came across that pretty early on, and that was one of my dreams that I would like to run La Ultra. I had the opportunity in 2014, and sadly for me, I dropped out at 49 kilometers. That's the first time I DNF'd at a race, and I remember just sitting at 49 and crying and very disappointed in myself because I'd worked so hard. And also this was a time, my dad was, he didn't know much about the sport himself, right? So he was like, what's his son doing? Just running around these long distances, right? And I remember having a chat with him before La Ultra about telling him that, someday I'll think about running ultras full time. And his thing was like, no, you're not doing it. You better just focus on studies, get into your masters, get a job after that. This running stuff is just, as long as it's a hobby, it's good. So anyway, so La Ultra was going to be that race where I thought, I'll prove it to my dad as well, and do really well. Anyway, since that didn't happen, I was disappointed, disheartened at 50K. But that was one of the biggest learnings I've had again after the 100K. I had started getting a little, ego boost in between the Bangalore Ultra in 2012 and the 2 years, 3 years later when I did La Ultra, because I was winning races. I had won a couple of ultras. I had set a couple of course records. So my ego was a little boosted. So that sort of brought me down and kept me, sane. But anyways, yeah. So after La Ultra, after that DNF, I decided to. I went and studied. I went back to the drawing board to understand why I DNF. I mean, I DNF'd because I didn't make the cutoff. Yes, but why did I make the cutoff? I went to study that. I went to understand. I went and put things down on paper. I tried to figure out what was the reason for me to be slow to meet 49, to not meet the timing cutoff at 49. Taking into consideration all the conditions, the weather, the altitude, and everything. One thing that I learned and took away from that was I was underprepared, right? Whatever excuse I could give, I had a bad stomach, I had a upset stomach, I wasn't able to consume calories. All that is an excuse. I eventually it all boiled down to the fact that I was underprepared. So yeah, that's one thing I decided that day, that whenever I do sign up for a race, whichever race it is, I will not sign up. I will not get to the start line without being well prepared. So that's why if you see with the way I race generally, I don't do too many races in a year. I do a couple of races, like uh, 3, 4 big races in the 100K, like 80K, 100K range, and then a couple of small, shorter races in the usually building up to these 100Ks. So that's how I plan my year, and I make sure I'm prepared and I'm well prepared for every event that I'm at the start line for. After La Ultra, after that learning in 2014, I decided that I was like, oh, all right, forget doing ultra running full time. India ultra running was still a very new sport. Globally, it was still a very new sport, especially trail running, right? Like people were not living and making a career out of the sport. Like maybe a couple handful here and there people, right? A lot has changed since then, clearly. But yeah, so naturally I was like, I couldn't do this full time, right? So I decided to get a job in Bangalore itself. I was working for a startup, and I kept running. In that decision, during that time, this was 2015, when I decided, I'll leave my job as well, mainly because I'd used a year to understand uh, what was going on in the ultra and trail running space globally, not just in India. And I was studying a lot of what was basically just online. I had better access to internet then. So just studying what was going online globally, right? With the guys like Kieren and new faces coming in, like Francois Dehaene and these new athletes who were popping up on the scene. How a lot of these athletes were living full-time lives. At least my one takeaway was that you can live a full-time life as a trail runner in the world. Basically, like people were able to make a career out of this. I must tell you, at that time, India, this was 2015. At that time, India did not even have a trail race. I had not yet run a trail race. Now, why did I focus on trail running? Why did I have an interest in trail running? This mainly boils down to my interest in mountaineering. For me, growing up, I don't know why, but I was always fascinated by the mountains. I never really lived in the mountains. The first time I came to the Himalayas was when I was, I think, 14. But from the time I did come to the mountains, I just had some pull towards the mountains. I just loved it over here in the mountains. Before I got into running, before I started running, I had dreams of becoming a mountaineer, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to climb Everest. I did a basic course when I was 16, and I had a basic mountaineering course in Manali, and I did that course, and I had dreams of becoming one of the youngest Indians to climb Mount Everest. This was when I was 16. So but 1 year later, Arjun Vajpayee, he ended up doing it. He's a friend of mine now. So, but yeah, he ended up doing it. I now ended up getting into mountaineering. But basically, my love for trail running comes from, I think it stems from there. The fact that I enjoy mountaineering. So if you see the kind of races I've done, most of my races in the last few years have been mountain races. Trail running races have been mountain trail running races. So whether it's in the mostly in the Alps, or a few of the races like in China, or the one in Malaysia around Kinabalu, or even Oman, right? It's in the mountains in Oman. So that's why I end up sticking to most of the mountain trail running races and not any other trail races. So like the marathon to subs and stuff, I don't really have any plans of doing that anytime. So yeah, so that's how I decided to get into trail running. Basically, to 2015, I've seen the sport change a lot more exposure. I had that, a lot more content on the internet that helped me as well to understand, what's going on in the sport of trail running globally. So yeah, 2015 is when I think I decided to leave my job, focus on trail running full time. And back then, I had no clue how to do this full time. I still don't have a clue how to do it full time. I'm still learning. There is no set system, right? Uh, there's no path that you can follow. Like, this is what you do. Especially in India, because since there's no system, like there are no brands that exist, like the Salmon trail running teams and the North Face teams. Like these guys don't exist in India. So it's something I keep figuring out. I keep learning, and I'm working towards consistency, right? So when I shifted left my job and got into the sport full time, I that went to do CCC. This was 2015. That was the first time I did a trail race. You guys might be wondering, like, how did I get to CCC without, because you have qualified, right? You need the points. All the races I did to qualify were road races. So the races were basically Nilgiris 100. It's a race in Ooty. I'd done that twice. It's in the mountains in Ooty, but on the road. Luckily, that race was still giving ITRA points. So I got those points, applied for CCC, gotten in the first year itself, and went for CCC. That was the first time I ran trails, and I had no clue what to expect. It was brand new. I did not, when I look at an elevation profile, so whenever like you run a race, even like Oman by UTMB, you usually have an elevation profile, like a graph, right? It shows you which kilometer markers, what kind of elevation gain, and everything, right? When I was looking at that for CCC in 2015, I had zero idea about what it meant. I did not know that in 10K, 1,000 meter climb like that, what it means. I had no clue. I had come to Manali back then as well. I spent a couple of months here. I lived in a small little shack in the village, and I trained over here, but I had no clue. I did not have a GPS watch. So no information, right? Nowadays we get out on the trails or wherever we go, we know exactly how much elevation gain we have got, how much descent we have got, the times on the ups and downs. We know all these things. Back then, I had no idea about this. I didn't have a way to actually gather this information since I didn't have the watches. I didn't have a smartphone or anything. So yeah, CCC for me, anyways, was another big learning because it was the first 100K in Bangalore, then La Ultra, and then CCC. Because it was the first time I'd done a trail race, it was 100K. I threw myself in the deep end of things, one of the biggest 100Ks in the world, and one of the most competitive ones. And yeah, I learned a lot again, learned a lot. I understood trail running a lot from that one race. I understood what technical courses mean. I understood what fast courses mean. I understood how to run downhill, how to run uphill. I learned from people. I made friends. Met a lot of other runners, and I just enjoyed that whole vibe. And I knew when I had done CCC that what, I want to stick to trail running. It didn't happen right away though. I ended up doing Spartathlon the year later in 2016. And so for you guys who don't know about Spartathlon, it is one of the most, I'd say among the most oldest, prestigious among them. And I wouldn't say hardest because every race is hard. Trust me. I find a 5K harder than a 100K, So yeah, it's among the among the older and, a race with a lot of history. It has a similar history to the marathon, and it's in Greece basically. It happens from Athens to Sparta. It's 246 kilometers long. So I did that in 2016, and I ended up being the first Indian to do it. And yeah, it was a decent race for me. Again, another race where I learned a lot. But also one thing that I did learn from that was that I was happy sticking to trail running. So after Spartathlon, I've not run a road race at all. I probably would have done a couple of short 5-10K races, but nothing more than that. After that, I did Hong Kong 100, and I've lost track, but I've done a bunch of trail races since then. Marathon du Mont Blanc, Oman by UTMB, UTCT, Ultra Trail Cape Town, Eiger Ultra, CCC once again. I ran a sky race in China last year, the Yaring Sky Race. So yeah, quite a few trail races since then. And so that's after Spartathlon is when I decided to shift to Manali. The reason I decided to shift to Manali was one, of course, focused on trail running full time. And also because Manali was a place that I've been to a couple of times. By now I had done one trail race, CCC, so I had an idea what a trail race entails. So Manali was in my head what I pictured would be the best location for me to be in and train. Also, centrally, it is well connected to the big cities. It's well connected with cell networks, because mountains is a big problem, cell network. So, all these things sort of fit well with Manali. So Manali is where I shifted. And after Spartathlon. So I'm about to do 4 years in Manali end of this year, October this year. So yeah, so shifting to Manali was definitely one of the best decisions I've made. And from a career perspective, there's lots I'm learning. There's lots that I'm learning every day. For me, I try to tell people, it's like me running a small startup, a one-man startup. I need to understand marketing. I need to understand sales. I need to understand social media. I need to understand uh, I need to train myself. I got to do all of it, right? So all of this is what it makes things interesting. It keeps life very interesting for me for sure. Uh, and there's no set path, like I mentioned earlier. Every year for me is very different. I don't have one right answer for how I'm making this a career and how I'm following sort of my goals and chasing my goals every year. There's no one set answer. Every year has been very different, and I figured out ways. The like we spoke about the photos earlier, right? The photos. The reason I do and put out good content is because I understand that the social media content is important. So, and I want to show the world, right? Everyone where I'm running, right? And good photos helps to do that. Not only that, videos helps to do that. So I'm lucky that, so I live with a few friends now in Manali. These are the guys who I met in Manali. These guys are also not from Manali. Now, in general, I think the adventure outdoor space in India is going through a very interesting time. And because of that, Manali, especially this village I'm living in, has become a little, you know, melting pot of a lot of people from different parts of India who have come here with different skill sets in the mountains and are living in Nasogi. So, like, one of my friends is a mountaineer. My neighbor across from my house is a guy who's done Everest, and he does rescue services for the army. The guys I'm living with in this building, it's basically a media house that shoots adventure sports in the mountains. So, so we are all a bunch of people living together, and so we feed off each other. And we are all like, symbiotic relationship. I make myself available for good images, good content. They shoot content for me, so we work together that way. And a lot of people doing that. Not a lot, but we have about 10, 12 people basically. And people I have met here, these guys also shifted here, and we just end up meeting. So that's how I am able to, put out good content, and I try my best to do that. And that's work. It's not like, we just go. It's planning. We go high up. I put out a photo recently um, about a week back, and that was like a solid 15-hour hike to get a couple of photos. Yeah, so that's how it is. And yeah, so that's pretty much been my journey for in general, in short. I'm probably definitely missing out on points here and there, but this has pretty much been a more journey for me. And for me, this year, of course, has changed a lot. For all of us, it's changed, right, with the COVID-19 situation. But from a racing perspective, I don't have any races lined up this year. I decided to just cancel all of them. I mean, they all got cancelled, and I decided not to even try and do any other races because it it's tempting. There's a race in November to go and sign up for it, but then I'll end up working and putting all this time, all these months for a race in November, and by chance I cannot travel, race gets called off. It'll be hard, and to continue training. And so for me, what I've focused is, instead of doing races and events, I am focusing on a lot of my own projects, my own goals that I've had in the mountains. Basically, a lot of goals that, like I mentioned earlier, right? My mountaineering is sort of my first love. So a lot of my races a lot of my projects that involve basically a lot of mountaineering. Uh, and I'm trying to mix running and mountaineering. So so Subhash earlier asked me if I have a little presentation. So I don't have a presentation because I'm headed out tomorrow morning for a small little project I'm doing on a mountain close to 5,000 feet of 1 meter mountain, where I'm running up that 5,000-meter peak, and it's a mountaineering peak with ice axe and crampons and everything. So I'm headed out tomorrow morning for that. So we're preparing for all that the last few days. So yeah, so these are the things that how I'm focusing my things for myself, this year, focusing on projects, focusing on things that I'm interested in other than just racing. So this has pretty much been my journey in brief till now. And yeah, Subhash, anything else about this? Any questions regarding this or something?
I think you have pretty much covered everything. Thank you, Karen, and it's a fantastic journey, and all the very best for your projects. I think I am also interested in the uh, I the mountaineering course, and many of my friends in Oman, they are also interested. Maybe we will get in touch with you to get more more
Definitely.
details, and yeah, maybe
Definitely.
that will be an offline discussion. Let's so
Definitely. Yeah, we can always keep that for later.
yep. Thank you, Karen. I think we would like to know more about how do you prepare for a ultra race. You do it all the time, so it's not. But how do you actually prepare for that, or how do you recommend
So,
us to?
Subhash, I just had one thing in mind. You also wanted, so you sent me a bunch of questions, right? So, a lot of these
Right.
questions are related to training, isn't it?
Okay. Okay.
So,
Yep.
could we keep the preparation for ultras after the next point on I'll talk about my racing in Oman last year a little bit, and
Yep.
then we'll keep
That.
preparation for ultras because then I can sync the questions that you sent me earlier because a lot of them
Yeah.
are
Sure.
training
Sure.
related, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Sure. Sure. Yep. Yep.
Okay. So I'll talk about Oman, right? Oh wow. So Oman was okay. The whole experience. I'm just very sad that I spent just 3 days in Oman in total, and I'm very disappointed with that. So I definitely plan to make another trip to Oman and not just come there for the race, but come there for the diving and everything because I'm really, really like it's such a beautiful place, right? To be in like the whole country, and I've not been. So I've lived in the desert in Rajasthan when I was growing up for a couple of years, and I've not been to a desert for over 10-15 years now. So being in Oman and seeing the colors and the beauty it was crazy. So running in Oman was like, oh wow, such a beautiful experience. And for me, because though I love running in the mountains like the Alps and everything, the fact that I've not run in the desert, kind of like a landscape like Oman, just heightened my whole experience of running around in Oman. Uh, and from what I know, I think end of November, December is probably the best time of the year, weather-wise at least, right, to be in as well. So
Yes.
it was a beautiful race for me. And from a racing perspective, it was disappointing mainly because I was not very well prepared. In the sense, I was not prepared to run in warm, hot conditions. Manali, living here, one of the things that I've lost out on is being able to run well in the heat. So Spartathlon was a hot race. In Spartathlon, I remember running as high as we almost touched 40 degrees Celsius when we were running that. But I trained for that. And since shifting to the mountains, I've lost that touch with the heat. I'm not able to race 30 plus is too hot for me now, basically. So Oman, I was not prepared to tackle the heat very well. So I struggled mainly from a heat perspective. I found it, I was just, losing salts, losing dehydrating very easily. So I was not able to run as fast as I would have liked to and, as I wanted to. But I think that's all right. It happens in races, and you again learn from it. I think I should. It's not like I don't know these things. I am aware that I should prepare in advance. I should have come to Oman and spend more time, probably a week, 10 days, just acclimatizing to the heat. Mainly because I was there to race, right? Like not there just to finish my race. I was gunning for a time, right? But I think the fact that I struggled also allowed me to run a little slower, but also allowed me to enjoy it. When you're running hard, you tend to just concentrate like horse with blinkers. You just concentrate on running hard. But the fact that I was struggling a little bit and running slow, I was stopping, taking photos, I was taking videos, running through just before the finish line. You run through a little oasis place where you can, with all the palm trees and all, and it's so beautiful, right? Like I ran through the whole section and I recorded like a 5 minutes worth of video. It was so beautiful. So I really enjoyed this aspect of racing, right? Which I usually don't get to do in most races. Where I can just take it easy, run, have fun, look at the landscape, say hi to people, people going by, and just enjoy it. So that's something I definitely miss out a lot. Like, running CCC and stuff last year, I was just like that, just running, 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 not concentrating on whether it was sunrise, whether the stars were out, nothing, just powering through everything. So that way, Oman was a great experience. Like, I definitely enjoyed it, and it was great that I could meet a bunch of you, right? Like, that was another highlight. And I'm definitely disappointed I couldn't spend more time. Like, once I landed there, I was like, oh man, I got to go back in 2 days. So yeah, that sucked. Uh, but also running the kind of trail the races that Oman by UTMB has is very different than what I've run in a long time. It's not like the mountain races. It's not, the landscape is different, right? So the terrain is very different. It's brittle. It's more sandy. It's more rocky. It's like sharp rocks and stuff which you don't have in a lot of trail races like UTMB. And so it was a different challenge and a different experience running on the trails. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I am definitely looking forward to coming back and racing Oman by UTMB once again, and spending a lot more time doing a lot of other things in the country as well. So yeah.
Kieren, like, we would love to welcome you next time when you are planning to come a bit early. Definitely, we will take you around. I myself will be, interested to spend some time. We can go around, and
Definitely.
we have a fantastic running group here. We will love to run with you, train with you. Also, we may be able to go up to
Exactly.
this mountain and spend some time
Yeah.
before the race. And we'll
Yep.
be happy to support you also in the race.
Yep. That would be perfect, right? Like, come there and I'll get to like hang around with everyone, and we'll actually get to meet in person, and that would be even better. So I definitely
Sure.
look forward to that. I doubt it'll happen this year, but I'll definitely make it happen as soon as I can, for sure. But
Yep.
yeah, all right. So
So,
I'll get on to preparing for ultra trail races.
yep. Please.
All right. Okay. So okay. So there is no right answer to training in general, right? Like, even if you're running on the roads, training for a 10K, for a 20K, whatever it is, everyone's body, everyone is very different. The kind of lifestyle you live, the kind of nutrition, the sleep cycles, the work hours, all of this is very different for all of us, right? So naturally, there's no right answer to training in general. When it comes to trail running, it's even more varied, mainly because it's not just the training that changes, it's also the kind of place you're running in, you're going to race in, that changes. And that is something that is different everywhere. Like I mentioned earlier, right? Like Oman, the kind of the trails you have are very dry, are very pebble, are very sharp, are very brittle. Whereas if you're running around on going up Cape Town, the landscape around the Table Mountain is very different. If you're going up and running like UTMB and CCC and Eiger Ultra and these races, the landscape is so different. So the trails are very different. The rocks are not as the trails are more smooth. They are not as technical on in some of the races. Naturally, if you're going to do some of the sky races and all that, those are very technical, right? So there's a lot of variety that there is in trail running. So when it comes to preparing for trail running, the first and the most important thing that you should look at and consider is trying to be as specific to training. So in and trying to be specific in everything. So you need to study all of it, the weather condition, the trail you're running on, the terrain you're running on, the distance between aid stations in races. Like, all these things need to be taken into consideration, and you need to plan all of this in training. The more specific you can get with training for a race, for whichever your race is, the better it is. Now I understand, of course, if you're living in Muscat and you don't have access to, trails like what are there in the Alps or what's there in the Himalayas here, right? Naturally, you cannot, like, if you don't have access to it, you basically get make the most out of whatever you have. So try to get as specific with whatever it is. Like, if there are, let's say, 10 variables in a race that you have to sort of prepare for, try to take, and try to prepare for each one of them separately as much, and try to get as close to preparing for the trail race in terms of specificity. For example, I'll give you two. One Oman and let's say CCC. So running in CCC, me being in Manali, I can do a lot of very specific training. I can do very steep climbs. I can do very long climbs. I can do 2,000-meter climbs in like without even a descent, like 2,000 meters in 10K, 1,000 meters in 4K. I can the trails I run on in Manali are very specific to CCC, are very similar to CCC because the landscape is very similar. Whereas when it comes to running at Oman by UTMB, the landscape is very different. Now, if I'm living in Manali, I cannot train for the kind of trails that I will be running on when I'll be running in Oman, right? I cannot train for the heat, but I'll try and control and try and get as close to it as possible. So let's say I cannot control the trails, but I can control the heat. How could I control the heat? I will wear more layers while running, right? That could be one thing because why I know that when I'm in running the race in Oman, it's going to be hot. It's going to be 30, 35, 40. I know that degrees Celsius, right? I know that. So I can wear more layers. So that's one way I'm controlling one variable out of the other variables that I'll be sort of coming across, right? So it's not 100% specific, but it's getting there, right? Another thing is
Awesome.
going going in advance. All of us can't, some of us can, but when you can, it's great to go in advance as well. Mainly try to do some recce, try to get used to the area, try to understand the landscape. Just going, even if you go 4-5 days in advance and just do hikes, you don't need to run, just go and do hikes on a certain course. Just get a sense and feel of what the course is going to be like. That helps a lot. This is all specific to trail running, right? Road is going to be different. So these are small things that you can do in training itself. Preparing for an ultra trail, other than these variables, the distance that you're preparing for gets important as well. Now, how do you prepare for a distance and your time goals is very similar to how you would train for any other race, right? How you would train for a marathon, or you have the same approach basically. You have a time target, you break it down. You break down the like where your fitness is currently, and you sort of plan your whole 5 months, 6 months, 4 months, whatever it is ahead, right? Break down your training as to understand your weaknesses. Again, in trail running, because there's a lot of change on a course. Understand your weaknesses. You know, some guys could be great going uphill. Some guys could be great descending. Some guys could be great only on the flatter sections of a course. So understand what you're good at. Understand what you're bad at. Like for me, I'm bad at climbing uphill. Like most of my training is focused on going uphill. I feel I'm very good at descending. So very little of my training is actually focused on descending. I focus on uphill. So now what do I do for getting uphill? Now I know my weakness is going up a hill. So then I break it down as to what all I can do to get better at uphill. Uphill is cadence. Uphill is strength. Uphill is power. So how do I improve on these 3 points, right? How do I improve my power? How do I improve my cadence? How do I improve my strength? What are the training things I need to do for these specific things? Whether it's power, it's lifting weights. I do weight training, so lifting weights. Now, should I do heavy weights? Should I do light weights with a lot of reps? These are all things you need to break down once you understand what your weaknesses are, right? When you're going uphill, what I know, when you're going uphill, lactic acid builds up very easily. You don't need to be going, like, you'll all feel it, right? When you're going uphill on a climb, legs start burning, right? That's basically a similar effect of what you experience when you're running and doing fast running on the roads on the flat, right? So training on how to get rid of that lactic acid, right? These are all things you train on. Now you don't, let's say, like if you're in a city like in Muscat, right? You train your body, you train your muscles to get rid of lactic acid, and that will help you on the climb. So you could do flat speed workouts. You could do like 400-meter rep, 1 kilometer rep, where you build lactic acid, right? You could do reps like that, and it's not related to trail running. It's not related to climbing uphill. But because your body has learned how to flush out lactic acid, it will help you when you're building lactic acid on the trail, right? So this is how you think about training, at least how I think about training when it comes to trail running, right? I break it down as much as I can. I break down and understand every aspect of it as much as I can. Maybe for someone the longer, if you're, let's say, you're doing 100K, your weakness could be the endurance side of things, not the power, not the strength, not the speed. So then you focus on building endurance. You focus on, maintaining and being able to have a strong finish by training longer runs, by going out on trails more often. Maybe a lot of you might have the weakness of not being able to run fast on technical trails, right? Like Oman is very technical, the course, right? When it's rocky and all, maybe you have to slow down. So then you start training for those things. How do you train for that? You go out on the trails. The way to train for technical courses is practice. The more you get out on technical courses, the more comfortable you get. You don't need to go fast. You need to just get comfortable. The more comfortable you get with running when things are steep and rocky and loose, the better you'll move, right? The only way to do that is to go out. You don't need to go out every day, but whenever you can, once a week, twice a week, whenever you guys can, it's a good thing. It's better than doing nothing, right? So then that's how I plan and break down training for myself. I don't do too many races, right? I mentioned earlier, here it's mostly 3-4 races, big races. So when I do 3-4 races, they're spread out, and they're usually anywhere like 3 to 4 races between 80 to 100k, 120k, like that range. A bunch of races, shorter distances in between these races. So I plan out the races as well, in the sense one race could be in April, one race could be in June, one race could be in August, one race could be in November. That's how I spread it out. And then I do a lot of shorter races in between. And I use the shorter races as training runs, right? So again, that's how I plan my year. And that's how I go about. And I don't do too many races, mainly because I prefer to focus on 4 races in a year, but do them well and run them strong. So that then I choose to do fewer races, right? So pretty much that's how I go about my training. I try to break down things. I try to get as specific as possible to come to the events I'm doing, and try to understand my weaknesses, because that's what you need to work on. Like your strength is things that you'll actually love to do, right? Like I know my strength is downhill and I love running downhill, but in training, my downhills are very slow, because I know if I run downhill all the time very fast, I'm going to, damage my muscles, my joints are going to get, more pounding, so more chances of it getting injured. So I take it easy on the downhill, but I focus a lot on uphill. So that's how I always break all my training. So because I give time for every race, I can plan training for every race. I'm not in a hurry. I can plan a good build up and good couple of months build up for every race that I do. That's pretty much how I approach training. There is no right answer I can give any of you, because everyone is different. You all have different timelines, work-wise, family situation. Everything is different, right? Different commitments. So naturally, everyone cannot also do the same training. Everyone will not have the same weaknesses. Some of you might feel scared on the downhill. Some of you might feel very comfortable on the downhill, right? So it's very different, and everyone should identify their own weaknesses when it comes to trail running. Pretty much, this is how I go about all my training, right? There's no like specific guideline I can tell you, because for me, my training changes every year. November, December, I take a step back. I look back at my whole year. I look at how I've raced. I identify what my weaknesses were in what race, how I felt, and then that's what I work on for the next year, right? There have been races where I've started to feel very good with climbing uphill. My uphill times have started getting better, but then I feel like my flat, where things are flat, that's where I'm, running slower. So then I start focusing on that. So I do this and revisit it every year, and there's no end to improving. You'll always keep getting better at the uphills. You'll always keep getting better at the downs and the flats. And every year you've got to identify which was your weakest, what's your weakest sort of vertical in all of this every year, and work on that every year. Work on that. So yeah, that's pretty much how I approach all my training, right? Yeah. All right, Subhash. Should I answer some of the questions that you sent me?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kieren. Actually, we have shared few such questions with Kieren to be, to save time and to have prepared with that. Actually, I got a question before you just go through the list. one interesting question I just received from the audience. Maybe we can start with that.
Yes,
Like, Mr. Anand want to know, he would love to run in Spiti Valley. You know,
yeah,
uh, would you be able to guide on that? I have been to Spiti
definitely.
Valley, but it's a different terrain, and so yeah,
Wow.
please,
So
Kieren. Yeah.
So I have run into from Manali from my house. I've gone on a run and gone into Spiti because there's Hamta Pass is right across and I've crossed it into Spiti. Uh, yeah, so Spiti Valley is a beautiful place to run, and I can definitely help you guys out. So since we are here, I can just what else? So I organize trail running camps in Manali, around Manali. For basically, the aim with it is to bring people to the Himalayas, to where I live, and teach people about trail running, about the training, about the gear, using poles, using the kind of shoes, using everything. So I teach about various aspects about trail running. It's usually like a 4-day kind of workshop that I do. So if a bunch of you are interested in Spiti and all, we could probably plan up and do some workshop like this in Spiti itself, right?
Wow.
Because so India, there are good things to and bad things to being in the mountains here. Like if you guys like Subhash, you've been here, so you'll probably be aware. Like there is no network coverage, right? You can like I can go about half an hour up the mountain from my house and I'm in the wilderness. I'll be no connectivity. So because of that, there's not much information easily available, right? Like you cannot, from a safety perspective, you cannot like if you get stuck, you cannot call anyone. You might see people, you might not see people, right? So these are a lot of things that you face in the mountains. So while it's I won't say unsafe. I think for me, I love it. This is more exciting, I don't want it to become like Europe where I can get 4G everywhere I go and there's a route marker on every trail telling me where to go. But yeah, so I think it's just easier to go with a group or go with people who already know about the area, right? But for sure, Spiti is something that I ran up this peak called Kanamo last year in Kibber. Kibber, yeah, from Kibber, it's a 6,000-meter peak. So I run up that peak last year. It's very close to Kaza, and then I've been to Spiti to Kaza in the winters. Do you know what's ice climbing?
No, no.
No. So basically, because of the extreme cold in the winters, all these waterfalls that we see in the summer, they freeze and they become ice pillars like that, long ice
Wow.
pillars. And then you basically ice climbing is a sport where you climb the waterfalls with ice axe and crampons. So
Wow.
I've gone to Spiti in the winters to do that. Like it's minus 30, and you're doing these things. So for sure, you guys, we can always plan something like this, and I can always, even if you don't come as a group and someone wants to come individually, I can try and help out as much as I can, whether it's with the stay or with some map routes and things like that. So that's not an issue at all.
Thank you, Kieren.
All right.
So there are some questions I think you have already answered, but there are some specific questions. Do you want me to read it for you to make it more easier for you, or you want?
Yeah. You can read them, and I can just.
Okay. So I think this is coming from one of the very experienced trail runner. How do you manage your pace while navigating the difficult and mostly unknown terrains?
Yeah. All right. So it's different in a race. It's different in training. Now, when it's in a race, it's usually there's less unknown terrain. I do tend to and do a fair amount of research in at least studying the graph, elevation profile. To I get an idea about. I try and do as much research basically for a race. In training, it's a lot more different. In training, there are very few times that I go on very new routes, and the times when I go on very new routes in training are the days when it's my easy days. The aim is to go out, have fun, relax, and run. So those are the days I do that. Now, in general, so unknown terrain, right? I'll answer mostly for difficult terrain, right? Now, difficult also is different. Like if you're going up a steep climb, that's difficult. If you're running on very technical, very rocky terrain, it's difficult. If you go with the idea of a pace in your mind before you even are on the trail, it's not going to work out because there is no consistency that you can follow on a trail. There's going to be a rock here. There's going to be a pebble here. The pebble could be loose. Maybe somebody who's run in front of you has kicked a rock and come on the trail. So there are a lot of variables like that, right? So if you go with the idea of a set pace, that this much pace I have to maintain, it's not going to work out. You need to plan out. It's easier to break down sections in a race, break down sections and have small targets for that. So instead of checking your watch every second, every little while to see how fast I'm running, it's better you have, let's say, like in Oman, like if you're running the 50K, right? Break down the section that's a climb. So the first section, let's say, is a climb for 10K. Break that down and only have a set target of, let's say, like an hour that you need to reach that point. So break things down that way. If you break it down very minutely to every few hundred meters, few kilometers, it's not going to work out, because even if you do the recce and you know the whole course, right? The course could be different if you have had 100 people run in front of you before in a race, right? So instead of having like on the roads, it's very easy to have this 420 is my pace I have to maintain for the whole event, right? It's very easy to do that because there are no variables. This smooth road, you just run. The biggest variables are like a sharp U-turn or something, right? So unlike that, trails don't have that, and that's why it makes it fun as well, right? You don't need to look at your watch all the time. That's what all these variables make things exciting. So breaking down sections of an event, since elevation profiles and everything are usually made available, right? Breaking down sections like that, maybe there are a lot of times on the palm on my hand here, I write down things. I write down all my target times, like this aid station I need to reach by this time, that aid station by this time. So I have target times written down. So you could do things like that. Have target times set for various sections, because then that will allow you to not look at your watch the whole time. How fast you reach those aid stations and everything, it comes down to how well you've trained, how accurately you have broken down your profile, in your head, how you have predicted your times to your aid stations. Like the better you train, the more you'll understand that, and the more accurately you'll be able to sort of pinpoint your time. And that comes with understanding, with more experience, or when you're working with someone, if you have a coach, if you're working with someone who can guide you with these things, that's the other way, right? If you're new to it and you work with someone, they can break it down. Someone who's coaching you, right? They'll be able to tell you because they know how you've been training. They'll be able to help you break down your time targets for various aid stations, for various points in a race, right? So that's how I go about, and I would suggest going about, managing your whole time targets in a trail race.
Thank you, Kieren. I'll move to the next question. How do you manage rehab and conditioning during injuries?
Okay, so I have been lucky. I've had one major injury, not major like broken bones and stuff, but the biggest injury I've had, that was last year in March, and that was an injury not from running but from falling off a rock while I was rock climbing. I hurt my knee, and that affected me whole of last year and still is a little niggle. So the first aim is not to get injured. You don't want to get injured at all, right? So that's what your focus should be always. You don't want to you don't want to overtrain. You don't want to get injured. You don't want to get into that position in the first place. And all your training is to manage not just improving, but also all your training should be focused on running productively so that you don't get injured at all. Doing things, not overexerting, not doing anything extra. Because when you do extra, when you push yourself too much all the time, is when you get injured. Most of my training that I do is very relaxed, very comfortable. It's very few workouts where I go very hard, right? So luckily, fortunately, because of that, I've never had a running related injury till date. 10 years of running, right? Not had that. When it comes to, let's say you have already been injured and you're getting back into running, the idea is to never rush. Sit with your physio. You don't know what kind of injury it is. Sit with your physio, understand what you can do, what you're supposed to do, do things within the guidelines that are provided. Don't go too much, because when you're coming back from an injury is when your weak. Your joints, your body, your injured part of your body is also weak, right? So if you do too much, it's going to hurt. It's going to get injured again. So naturally, it depends on what injury you have as well. But if you, when you are in rehab and you're coming back into running, take it very easy. Don't think about pushing. Don't think of suddenly running lots. Go back, treat it like how you would have treated running when you first came. Ideally, when you start running, you want to start running easily. You don't want to, in 1 month you start running, like you start running today, 1 month later you're doing a 21, 2 months later you're doing a 42, 3 months later you're doing 100. You don't progress like that, right? There's a way you progress consistently, slowly, and you keep progressing and working. That's how you do it after an injury as well. Stay fit, take it easy, get stronger. One reason why people get injured a lot is pushing, doing too much, overdoing things, and also not focusing a lot on strength training. I definitely believe a lot in strength training, and also I also believe in cross training. The way I approach it is 90% of my training, 80 to 90% of my training is running because that's my focus sport. But every other day, couple of times a week, I do hit the gym. I do different sport just because variety is good for your body. Our body, loves to do things over repeat, gets comfortable. Our body loves that, right? But when we do things over and over again, we get stronger, but we also get to a point where we get very comfortable. And once we get comfortable, our body is not developing then, right? When you keep adding some variety to training, something new for your body, some new movement for your body, in small, you don't need to do lots. You just do little all of it, right? Whenever you add variety that way, it's shocking your body all the time, and it just helps your body to get stronger and get stronger and get stronger. So whether you're coming out of an injury, whether you're just training generally, focusing on a lot of these things is always great.
Thank you. So I think I will go with I don't know whether it's easy question. Which is the toughest ever race you have done
Yeah.
so far?
So this is one of my favorite questions people ask me. The toughest race I've ever done is never the race that's gone by. It's always the race that's coming. What scares me is not the race. What scares me is the training. Because it's like months of training and slogging and waking up in the morning and running and hard, and that's what's painful. The race is what's usually fairly easy. Because I've trained for it, right? I've put in months and months of work so that the race goes well. So usually it's this race that's coming up that's scary. But the toughest race in terms of the proudest race I've ever had till now is Patathlon. Not because of the distance, but mainly because of the way I tackled all the problems that came along during the race. Right, I got injured. I sort of got This is the first time I was running over 160 kilometers, and and that 200 kilometers more. So I had sort of around 205 kilometers. I picked up a little problem in both my ankles. One ankle had tendonitis, another ankle was like that fat, swollen up. At 205 kilometers, and that means I still had 40 kilometers more to run, right? That 40 kilometers took me 8 hours of being on the road. So I think the fact that I was able to push, I didn't give up. I was able to go through all of that and finish the race is why I'm proud of myself for that. But yeah, I don't want to be in that situation again though.
Thank you. So the nutrition days before the race, and I think also the just so yeah. So how do you plan your nutrition the days before? Yeah.
So it's hard to plan nutrition before a race, mainly when you're traveling. Being in Manali, I'm always traveling for a race, right? So always encountering new food, different kinds of food. So when I can control it, I try to stick to what I'm used to when I can control it, and that's not the case. I can never control what I get to eat in terms of, especially living in India and what I'm used to eating, and if I'm traveling outside India and what I get access to. So when I'm traveling, how I approach it, what I do is I try to eat uh, clean and simple, because that's what I feel I'm comfortable with, right? Like wherever I am, I'll not get too adventurous with the food, especially the last 2 or 3 days before a race. I try to keep it very simple, very clean, very uh, things that I'm normally also eating. So let's say like if I'm in Europe, I'll stay away from cheeses, from a lot of cheese for 2 3 days before a race. I will probably not eat too. I'll try and just stick to salads and simple, clean food. I will not get into a pizza. And I mean, even like in France and Italy, they do put a lot of like oil and stuff on pizzas. Like I stay clear of things like that. The last 2 3 days only, just so that I don't get. And also, I try to cook it at home, and not eat outside and in the restaurant that much, especially the last couple of days. Because at home I can control wherever I am. I usually stay in a place when I'm traveling where I can cook, because I'm usually going for a couple of weeks at least, right? So then so I try to cook in the wherever I'm staying itself. And out of that little few days before a race and after a race, I eat everything then. Because that's the fun of traveling, right? You want to try and eat new things, and part of traveling, yeah, experience new things.
So thank you for that. What?
Oh, sorry. I'll just build on that a little bit. So again, nutrition is also something that's very specific to everyone, right? So there is no thing like carb loading or eating more protein or eating like it's, I think if you're what you're used to is what you should focus on eating, not trying to change your food habit. Like, suddenly because the race is approaching, I'll start carb loading 2 3 days all the time. So that is these are like small things that you don't want to change and do new things before a race, right? It's the same logic. Like when you're racing, you don't wear a new pair of shoes, you don't wear a new t-shirt, you wear things you're already trained in, right? So you train for everything, right? So even what you eat before a race is usually a similar process. And one thing you do focus on, I focus on a lot, is hydration in the week 10 days leading up to the event. Drink a lot of water, right? Because that these are the days when you're running less. So focus on hydration. When you're going to be running, you're anyways going to get dehydrated at some point. So you want to try to drink regularly as well and sleep a lot. Sleep very well. All right. That's it.
Thank you. Actually, I think you covered 2 questions there. Yeah, thank you for that. And
All right.
so, what are the fuel one should carry while ultra race? I think
Okay.
personally, I need this support. I faced a lot of challenges in especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I must tell you guys that I don't have a right answer and specific answer that you can note down, and this is the right answer. Everything is very specific to an individual. For the best way to go about is training. You practice what you're going to eat. When you're going to race, you need to practice what you're going to eat during a race in training as well. If you're going to do, let's say, like for me, it took me 3 4 years of practicing and failed ultras not failed but bad ultras to learn what I eat. Like when I first did a few stadium runs in Bangalore, running around 12 hours in a circle, I did gels. The gels didn't work for me, but then I practiced it. I trained myself to eat gels. I remember till 2016, 2017, I could barely do 100 calories in 1 hour. Now in a race, I do 400 calories in 1 hour, right? So 400 calories, but I've trained myself to get to that point. What I eat in a race is also what I have trained. I have broken down these calories. I know I can do about 80 to 90 grams of carbs, right? I've broken down these sources of carbs for me. I do a gel, I do some powders, and I do some solid food. So this is what works for me, right? I cannot say this will work for someone else. What I can tell you is you practice it. You'll have bad training runs, and the best time to practice, I feel, is on a long run. There could be days you'll have bad training runs, bad long runs, because you're practicing your nutrition and your stomach's gone bad and you're not comfortable with it. But that's good. You rather learn about these things during your long runs than on a race day, right? You don't want to experience this on race day. Race day is you should be 100% sure what you can eat. What you can eat changes on the weather conditions a lot. If it's hot, if it's cold, if it's humid, it will change. So these are things you need to keep in mind as well. Uh, what I do is one gel in cold conditions. It's one gel. It's two gels and a little bit of solid food. So solid food could be a chocolate bar. It could be a fruit. It could be some cheese. It could be just some soup with some rice in it. It could be any of these things. Um, uh, if it's a hotter race, I reduce gels and increase more powders. So powders is what you mix in the water, right? So if it's a hot race, I do more powders where I'm also hydrating myself and also getting in carbs and calories, right? So that's how I do that. Like in Oman, in this race I ran in Malaysia, around Kinabalu. Both these races were hot races, but different kinds of hot. Oman was drier. Kinabalu was humid, right? So I had to figure out a little different strategy in both these conditions. One of the solid foods, like in Malaysia, I had a lot of pineapple. A lot of pineapple growing, so I ate a lot of pineapple at aid station, right? So that was what was easily accessible. So solid foods is usually few, like little bit of it, not too much, but it's also things that are very specific to what's being provided in at the event at the aid station. The best thing is to understand to train with it. Whether, like, some people gels don't work, right? A lot of people probably gels don't work. Also, it's great to understand what kind of gels work, because different brands, different companies are making different kinds of gels. So understanding what gel works for you. For me, I know, like, so do you guys know about this company Univet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have heard
Okay.
about.
So yeah, so Uniware is a company. They're based out of Bombay, right? Okay, so full disclosure, they sponsor me as well, right? So
Uh,
they're my nutrition sponsor. Yeah. So now they make two kinds of gels. They make one elite line of gels and one regular line of gels. Personally, I prefer the elite line of gels, right? And I mostly I tend to eat only the elite gels. Now, I don't know why I prefer it. It could be different for someone else, right? But I know there are two gels being provided to me, and I know which gel I prefer. So I don't tend to have the regular gels at all. Like maybe one here and there, but that's it. Like when I was running CCC last year, I did, I think, 18 gels. Out of that, probably 15 or 16 were the elite gels, right? So that's how but I know that what I like, what I don't like, because I've trained and practiced with it, right? So I'm not saying you need to practice on every single run, but in the build up to an event, 5, 6 runs like that, especially the long runs, because most of us are running endurance races. So that's when you get the most sort of feedback from your body. Practice that, right? Practice the hydration, practice the gels, practice how many gels you can consume, how much food you can consume. It's all training. Yeah.
Thank you. Uh, what about the hydration recommendations? You have already covered the days leading
Briefly.
to the race. Yeah, but
Okay.
during the race, when
Yeah.
we.
So hydration is very important. So you can overhydrate and you can underhydrate, right? So finding that balance is, again, training. Unfortunately, that's the answer to it. The conditions you're running in make a big difference. If you're running in a hot condition, you naturally, common sense, you need more water. If you're running in a cold condition, you need less water. If you overhydrate, you'll have salt imbalances in your body, and you'll have more water, less salt. You'll have issues with that. If you underhydrate, naturally there'll be less salt in your body. So these are things you need to take into consideration uh, when you're racing, right? So to find the answer to that is to practice this in training again. Because what you're doing in training is you're understanding your body, you're understanding what works for you. I know if I'm running, like, so if I'm running in Manali, I can go out for almost 6, 7 hours without water, right? But if I'm running in Bombay, I need water, like half a liter of water every 1.5 hours. But I know this because I've run in these conditions and I've understood how my body is dealing with these conditions. Most of the time you're running in, if you're since you're living in Oman, you're running in Oman. It is hotter conditions. So keeping in mind that it's hotter, so you hydrate more. but keeping also in mind that only hydrating is not enough because you're also losing a lot of salt. So also figuring out salt is important, right? Not just plain water. So that's where your elite drinks or just having salt capsules plays an important role, right? Example: when I was running in Oman by UTMB, I had one salt capsule every hour or two salt capsules every hour, right? But when I'm running like CCC, it's cold conditions. I'm doing like one salt capsule every 2 hours, right? That's how I break it down. So practicing these things, understanding how your body is reacting to these things is what is the most important. If you guys again, if you guys have a coach, giving this feedback to the coach, sharing these things, discussing these things with the coach is what will help you. So because see, I can just tell you do it in training, but unless you discuss this, unless you keep these things in mind when you are training, it will not help. So when you're training next time, keeping this thing in mind, keep and discussing it with a person who's coaching you, like these get feedback, it will help you understand. So basically, that's how you go about it. Now,
Thanks, Kieren.
never think of overhydrating. Don't think more water is good. It's not.
True. Yeah. I heard that you are very good at downhill. So can you just guide us, like how to improve our downhill techniques?
All right. So downhill, I love this, right? So anyways, I love downhill in races every time. So downhill, the most important ingredient is confidence. Why we slow down is because we are scared. We are scared of tripping. We are scared of rolling down. You can see a steep descent. So mostly it's the fear that's slowing us down, and then it is our muscle. It's our muscles and our joints. In the sense, running downhill is a lot of impact on our muscles, on our joints, right? So we need to train for these things. Uh, so the best way to improve downhill is to get out on trails. The more variety trails you can get out on, the more often you can get out on trails, the more comfortable you'll get on trails. The more often you go out, the more often you will end up. There are a lot of like on a trail because there are a lot of you'll keep twisting your ankle, you'll keep your knees will bend here and there. You're not running straight. You're always hopping here and there, here and there. So practicing these things and doing this in training is how you will basically get stronger at downhill. There are a lot of small things you can do without even going to to on the trail. One thing what I do is you everyone has access to steps in their house or in their building somewhere, right? Take 3-4 steps, stand at the base of 3-4 steps, keep a keep just picture those steps, close your eyes and walk up those steps, right? Close your eyes and take 3-4 steps up, take 3-4 steps down. What you're doing is just getting used to picturing a route in mind and trusting your feet will follow. So in trail running, when you're running, you never look down at your feet. You're always looking 10 feet ahead, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. You're always looking ahead. So this whole activity will help you gain confidence and trust that you when you're looking ahead, you're also picturing the whole trail. When you're doing that, you trust your feet will follow, and you think in your head that's where I'm stepping sort of, and your feet follow. So this is like one small exercise you can do anytime. Just stand at it's like anytime, 1-2 minutes, whatever. Just stand at the start of at the base of some steps, close your eyes and walk up and down, walk down. Open your eyes, picture it again, walk up, walk down, walk up, walk down. Simple thing. One other thing is strengthening not your muscles only, but also your joints. The 3 joints that are playing a big role and taking a lot of pounding are your ankles, knees, and your hips, right? On every trail, all of you, when you have been out on a trail, you'll experience your foot, your ankle twisting, right? So you want to have strong ankles. Training and doing small exercises, easy exercises to make your joints stronger will again help us. It'll also help you from not getting injured, right? It'll make you more stable. A lot of mobility work is what I try to do for these things. I slackline a lot, so that helps. One thing I do irrespective, just for fun also, is when I'm brushing my teeth, I close my eyes and I stand on one foot. Just like a stupid thing, right? Basically, standing on one foot with your closed eye, what happens is I end up using my foot muscles to to maintain my balance. Just try that. Like close your eyes and stand on a foot. You will go off balance completely. But as you get better, your foot muscles, your joints, your knees, your hips will all work together to maintain that balance. And that's what's happening is your joints are working and getting stronger. So these are small things which will help you to just get stronger joints and stronger ligaments for when you're running on the trail. So practice these small mobility workouts, and yeah, getting and running on as much as variety of trail as possible. Another thing is shoes. Shoes play, I think, for downhills plays a very important role because the shoes is what's maintaining the contact with the surface. So that you need to have trust in your shoes, that your shoes will hold up on the surface that you're running on, right? So the choosing the right shoe for your foot is what's important as well. Like I'll give you an example. You know the brand Ultra, ALTRA, Ultra?
Yeah, heard about it.
Yeah. So basically it's a brand that focuses on a very wide toe box. That's their USP. The toe box of the shoe is very wide.
True.
Personally, I don't like that. Why? Because I like narrow shoes. I like tight fitting shoes because I find it's just an extension of my foot. So I trust, exactly where my foot will land on the surface. Whereas the ultras, because they're a little broader, I on very technical trail is where I find it difficult. Like the edge of the shoe will hit a rock, and those things give me a little less confidence. So choosing the right shoe makes a big difference as well.
Thank you, Kieren. So
right.
This question was like, just while you're explaining, I got this question maybe. Are you doing a lot of balance training as part of your strength? Okay.
I do a lot. So, you know what a Bosu ball is? I have a Bosu ball at home.
Yes.
I do a lot of balance workouts on that. And you know the Swiss ball, right? The round Swiss ball. Right. I do workouts on that. So I stand up on the Swiss ball and do squats nowadays. And these are all a lot of balance workouts. Wow. It's great. Yeah. Because when you're doing regular strength training, you usually in strength training we tend to focus on the big muscle groups. The mobility workout is when we tend to focus a lot more on the ligaments, on the smaller, on the supporting muscle groups.
Right. Thank you, Kieren. Yeah. So when you are training for the trails, so the question is the distance the best way to train for trails based on the target race distance?
No, distance is not the best way. The best way is to understand what your weakness is for your target race, right? I mentioned earlier, right, in training.
True.
So let's say you're training for 100K, and if you have good endurance in general, it doesn't help to train more endurance, right? Maybe your aim is to go faster. So your aim should be to work on how to go faster, right? So distance is never the right answer in general. Even on the roads, even if you're running a marathon, if you're running a road 100K or 24-hour, the right answer is not running more distance always. It's always understanding what you need for that event. Like for a 20, like for 24-hour events, right? When you're running around in a circle for 24 hours, you're running 250 kilometers. Naturally, mind will think, if I run more distance in a week, I will run more 24-hour races, distance in a 24-hour race, right? But that's not how it works, because you don't need to only run 200-kilometer weeks and only then you'll be able to run a good 24-hour race, right? It comes down to what your weakness is for that particular event. So yes, distance. So unfortunately, not unfortunately, sorry. For endurance sports, distance is what our major focus is on. Mileage is what our major focus is on. But mileage varies a lot, right? Like if I'm running a 50K race, I think 70 to 80 kilometers a week is enough distance for me, right? If I'm running a 100K race, 130 kilometers a week is enough distance for me, right? If I'm running a UTMB with 170 kilometers, I think 130 to 150, 160 is what is enough for me. But there are people who could run 100, 110 kilometers a week and still do well at UTMB. There are also people who would do 200 and 250 and still do well at UTMB. So it's all about working on your weaknesses and your strengths and playing with those things, right? If speed is your strength, great, work on endurance. If endurance is your strength, great, work on speed, right? Identifying these things.
Thank you, Kieren. So uh, I have one question. It's a bit long one, maybe. Training tips for high altitude events like Kardungla Challenge, Ladakh Marathon, while we are based out in locations that are not, but very much high elevation. We are actually, most of us are living in sea level.
At sea level, yeah.
Yeah. So your thoughts is only pre-acclimatization is the only solution, or we can do anything else to improve that part?
All right. So, again, La Ultra, Kadungla Challenge, these are high altitude races, right? Understanding all the variables involved in this race is the first job. What are the variables involved? Altitude is one of the biggest ones and the easiest to identify. Then the weather. The weather in Ladakh goes from extreme heat to extreme cold. So it could be snowing at one point of the race and it could be like 40 degrees in the same race, right? So it's altitude, it's distance, it's heat, it's the cold, right? These are variables that you are going to face in the race now. What are the things that you for preparing? What are the things that you can start working on? Oman, you have great access to heat; it's everywhere, right? So you're sorted with that. So now out of 4 variables, one is done. You have 3 variables left, right? Altitude, cold, and distance. Distance is something you can train for easily. So you're sorted with that. Distance is what you can do. 2 variables done. Now it's just two variables left: altitude and cold. Now this is something being in Oman is going to be hard for you to train. One way, cold, like sub-zero temperatures, would be extremely hard. Unfortunately, you can't do much about it, right? Altitude, if you can invest in some equipment nowadays, there is a lot of these high altitude masks and tents that you get. If you're really serious about the event to that extent, you can invest in those things. But if you don't invest in those things, you can still always plan to go well in advance. The only way to prepare yourself for altitude is acclimatization, and that is time. There is other than some of these investments in some of these equipment, the other way is time spent at altitude, right? Unfortunately, there's no other shortcut. So planning, but if you're looking at a big race and you're looking at preparing for a race like this, it's all about bringing bringing down the variables as close to being as specific to the event. One thing is Ladakh is very dry, it's very similar to Oman in terms of the landscape as like sand and like the mountains. There's a lot of sand. There's sand dunes and all in Leh, right? The mountains are not like green and trees and lush, right? So some of those things, like if it's like Khadungla is on the road, but if it's going to be a little bit on the trails around there, then you have access to some of those things. So it's all right. You cannot adjust to and take care of every variable, but look at the positives and use that to keep motivating you. For altitude, coming out in advance, the more time you spend. There's no right answer to how much time is at altitude. I live at 2,000 meters, and I would still acclimatize to go up to 5,000 meters, just because the more you acclimatize, the better you'll perform, right? 10 days is not enough if you want to perform very well. If you're going to compete against someone living there, 10 days is not enough. 10 days is the least you can do so that you don't get any high altitude symptoms. So yeah, that's how you go about it pretty much.
Yeah, so I have something related question. Is stair climbing going to help, for ultra races? If you are doing
so it will help. It will help for certain kind of ultra races, right? For trail races, when you have a lot of elevation gain to do, you're climbing up that a lot. Stair climbing will help. It's also about it's not it's like if you're going to replace climbing on stairs, if you're going to climb on stairs instead of going and running uphill on trail, then it will not. Like let's say if you have access to both, you have access to steep trails and you have access to the lot of stairs. If you choose stairs over trails, that's not the right answer. Then you rather do the trails. But when you don't have the trails, the best option is stairs. You make the most out of what is available to you. So when I was training for CCC the first time, right, I was being in Bangalore. I ran on stairs. I found a building, 25 floor big building. I used to do reps up and down on that building, right? Because that was the best I had access to, right? So it's better than not doing that. I will make some gains, right? That's how you go about
Is it going to also help the altitude, the stair
it. The
training?
stairs will not help for altitude. Altitude is not about going up and down. It's about climbing in terms of elevation. You want to be at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 meters of height. You don't want to just gain that much by moving up and down because of the pressure difference, right? When you're in Spiti and Ladakh, you feel that you can't breathe. That will not happen on the stairs. That
True.
is things like masks is what will help.
Thank you. What about using poles? Are you regularly using poles, or is it a must?
Yeah. I have poles right here, like 2 poles. Like I have like 4 pairs of poles. So yeah,
okay.
poles is great. Poles have a place, but like again, it's another thing that you need to learn how to use. It's not like I'll get poles only for races and use them. If you have poles, you use them in training. If you don't have poles, that's all right. The use of the pole is very specific to a person. Again, some people like it, some people don't like it. It also depends on the terrain you're running on. Sometimes if it's very technical, poles are not helpful. If you're running on good, like good trails where you can climb and descend easily. Like Oman, poles are still helpful. But if you're going to do like one of the sky races in Italy where you're going up these Matterhorn and stuff, it's crazy technical. Poles are not helpful then, right? Or then you end up packing the poles in your pack. So yeah, poles have its place. They are great. I love using poles. Till about a year and a half back, I was not a big fan of poles. But since the last 2 years, 1.5 year, I am a big fan of poles. I always use poles. I train with poles. In a week, I use poles at least. If I'm running 10 times a week, I'm at least using poles 6 times a week.
Thank you. What about, do you have a recommendation of which shoes we should pick for a ultra trail run?
So okay. So I'm sponsored by Scott, so I will say Scott. But whatever shoes you use are very specific to what you like and what you find comfortable. In general, when you're using any gear, one of the prime things you want to keep in mind is comfort, not what is good. A bad shoe for me could be comfortable for you, right? So comfort is what you focus on the most, whether it's clothing, whether it's poles, whether it's the pack, and shoes even more important because you're using those shoes the most. You're pounding and running in them the most. So whether it's road running, trail running, it's the being comfortable is what should be your main focus, right? Then when you're choosing shoes, you choose them based on the kind of terrain you're going to run in them. If you're going to run in very dry and very brittle, the trails are very brittle and a lot of pebbles and rolling, and you want to choose a different kind of shoe. If you're going to run in a place where it rains a lot and you can slip and slide a lot, you want a shoe which has more grip. If you're running in a place where the trails are not technical, it doesn't rain as much and it's smooth, you want a shoe with a little less grip. So that's how you decide what shoe you need. Comfort and the use. All shoes have, especially based on the sole, on the grip, right? The shoes have a purpose. Some shoes with a lot of grip are mostly um, for monsoon, like wet conditions, and the ones with little less grip, which are closer to road shoes, are for like drier conditions. But because of the more grip, you also tend to have more weight. So that's another decision you need to make. But that's how pretty much you choose a shoe. Yeah.
Thank you, Kieren. So one question, which are the best places to run and train for trails in India?
In India, I would say Manali. This is where I live.
Okay.
So I love Manali mainly because there's also like easy access to big mountains. Coming from a place like this from 2,000 meters, most trail races are not that high. So I'm very well acclimatized to almost every trail race when it comes to the elevation altitude. Also I have lots big playground. I have a lot of trails to run on, and Spiti is right here, like 30 kilometers from my house, and I'm in Spiti and a little up the valley, and I was in Ladakh. So the kind of trail conditions you experience in these places is again very different. So I have access to multiple kinds of trails as well. So for me, it has to be this region for sure.
Does cycling help the ultra training?
So yeah, see when you're um, can you guys hear me?
Yes. There was a bit
All
disconnection,
right.
but now we can hear.
Okay. So when you're training, prime focus needs to be on the activity you're training for. So if you're training for a running event, your main focus needs to be running. So if you do any other activity around that, it's all right. It's great. It will help you. Cycling, swimming, anything, But if you tend to do, let's say, most of your training is another activity, but your goals are running, it will not help. So let's say out of 100%, if 80% of your training is running and 20% is cycling, it's great. It will help you. You'll naturally will build power. You will build, your muscles in a different way that you don't build up the same like when you're running. But if you do it the other way, where let's say 30% of your training is running and 70% is cycling, naturally that's not going to be the most ideal, and it's not going to help you as much because your focus is something else and you're training another activity. So it's all about the ratios and how you balance it out.
Thank you. What is your which one is your most favorite ultra, and why?
Yeah. All right. In trail running, it's so hard to choose because every place is so different and so so different, right? So it's a very different experience always. But for me, I think running in the Alps, especially around UTMB and Eiger Ultra and Marathon du Mont Blanc, these areas, these are among my favorite races, Zigama and everything. Mainly because not just the landscape I'm running in, but also the community. I'm not sure how many of you follow like Tour de France, but even if you don't, you would be aware, right, about the spectators that line the roads when people are cycling by. Running in the Alps in these races is a very similar experience, right? And, you running in, you watch some of the videos from UTMB and people lining the streets and people just cheering you on, and all of this adds to a very like a very beautiful experience. So it has to be some of these races in the Alps around these regions for sure.
Thank you. And I think maybe these are some of the questions which is coming up as regular. How to stay away from injuries? You already covered it a bit, that especially like runner's knee and stress fractures, because when we get into ultra trail runs, these are common injury patterns. Yeah?
True. So exactly, I mentioned earlier, right, about during the rehab topic, that when you're training, there are a lot of things you need to keep in mind. A lot of us overdo training. A lot of us tend to do too much, right? And that doing too much is one big cause of getting injured. Doing too much and doing too much too soon, and also doing too much for a long duration, right? So what is too much is very specific to you and me. It's very different, right? For me, 130, 140 kilometers a week in the mountains is comfortable. It's not too much. It could be too much for someone else, right? So that's what I mean. Like doing too much is one big cause for injury. Also, doing only one kind of thing. So earlier, we spoke about cycling and how I said, right? So it's great to do cross training. It helps because doing any different activity is just building your muscles and your body in a very different way and adding small benefits which you don't get by doing running repetitively, right? So that's how you go about it. You do a little bit of different things and teach your body new things, teach your body how to adapt to new things, right? So the other thing is not recovering from training. A lot of us just go out and run a lot. If you don't recover well, the chance of you getting injured is again quite likely, right? So these are not sleeping. Recovery is sleep, food, eat, not food, hydrating. If you don't focus on these things, you could, the chance of you getting injured is high. So it there's always it's better to do a little less in training than to do too much, right? It's all right if you feel at the end of the week that I could have done more, but it's bad if you feel every week that, oh man, I'm so dead, I can't do any more, I can't run. And if you feel like this week after every week, that's not a good sign. You rather feel that be in a comfortable place with training. And then, of course, with the kind of lifestyles we live, only doing only running is not going to help. Strength training plays a big role as well. Strengthening your muscles. Running is not strengthening your muscles. You need to do a different activity, lift weights, do mobility workouts, do these things on the side. Even if it's once a week, even if it's like once in 2 weeks, but it's being done regularly, these are things that will definitely help.
Thank you, Kieren. Actually, I have maybe only few questions more. Uh, Thank you for your time. Actually, I know you are preparing for some projects, and we have taken a lot of your time.
No
So,
problem at all.
so which is the longest ultra? I think you have already mentioned this, but just to confirm.
Parathlon.
Parathlon, yeah. So it usually
246 kilometers.
Yeah, so it is 160 mile or 130 mile, right? Do they measure by mile?
It's 146 kilometers.
Okay.
I'm not too sure about mile conversion. I think it's 146, 150, somewhere around there.
Right.
Probably 150 or something.
So I think this is a very important question, especially for runners like us. What is your advice if we get injury during a run? During a race.
In during a race, yeah. I think it's always a hard decision. It's important for everyone. Everyone gets injured. Anyone can get injured. During a race, you keep the bigger picture in mind. If you have to drop out and pull out of a race because of an injury, it's all right. You think, the race we are running is not the last race we are ever running, right? We want to run in the future and keep running races for 10, 15, 20 years. So think about the bigger picture always. It's all right if you get an injury. Pushing through and understanding what kind of injury is important. If you have an injury like a torn hamstring or something, you naturally want to just pull off. You don't want to push through it and make things worse, right? So understanding if the injury is something that you can push through and it's all right, you can sort of like, to some extent, we all get some niggles during a race, right? So understanding that it's all right to push through those is important. Understanding what kind of injury you're experiencing is important, right? If it's an injury, you fall down or you tear a muscle and things like that, you naturally don't want to push through things like this. I know you do read about people pushing through these things and everything, but in the long run, it not necessarily will help, right? What if you make that injury worse and you can't run for a couple of years after that? Was it worth it? Not usually. It's not worth it, right? You rather take it easy in that race, take it back, drop out, but 1-2 months later you get to come back and go for another race. So it's taking a hard decision, but it's taking a smart decision.
Thank you, Kieren. What about your recommendations on recovery techniques? After a race or
Yeah. So after a race, for me, it's a beer usually. But recovery is something you're doing not just racing, even after long runs, even after, like, I'm tapering today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow for my project, right? So this is me recovering from a couple of weeks of training. What you do is hydration, food, sleep, rest. These are the basic things. Eating very well, keeping your micronutrients, your macronutrients, the levels on top, keep staying healthy. That's most important. Other than that, stretching, yoga, foam rolling. Nowadays, you have things like recovery boots. You have these complex, like electromagnetic things that you can use on your muscles. So all these things help. All do a good job. And it's not that only one of these things is what you need to do. Doing a little bit of everything is great. Ice bath, hot showers, in and out. These are great recovery things. using compression gear, especially I tend to use compression, especially after when I'm really tired. I'll put on compression socks and thighs on my thighs and everything. Giving massage, you getting a massage is great. Not every day, but but at least after hard sessions, after hard weeks, a couple of times, once or twice a month at least, getting a good massage is great as well. So it's a lot of the basic things, and doing a lot of these basic things is great. Yeah.
So I think I am done with most of the prepared questions. If anyone want to ask some question, this is a golden opportunity. Like Mr. Kieren is with us, and just share if you want, or just raise your hand using the Zoom feature. We will allow you to open up your mic, but let's try to limit it only to another 5-10 minutes. Considering the time constraints. Yeah, we'll just give few minutes, Kieren.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. So kind of you.
All right. In the meantime, like about the stuff I keep putting out, Instagram is where I keep putting out. I've put out a couple of videos about running around in Manali as well. The Hamta Pass video I put out that on Instagram, running around Hamta. So if you guys want to just check out where I get to run around, definitely have a look at the handle, and you get 2-3 videos, not too many. But in a couple of weeks, there'll be the video on the project that I'm doing as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Kieren. Actually, I am very much interested for the workshop which I came to know now during this session. Maybe I will contact you for that, and maybe some of us will be interested.
Yeah.
Also, maybe we can combine it with mountaineering, some exercises. That will be.
Yeah, let's discuss this for sure. And if there are a bunch of you in the group who would be interested, we can plan it out and do one for the whole group in Manali and Spiti and in these areas. So yeah.
Sure. I think there are no more questions, Kieren. I think we have covered end to end most of the questions. So that should be. So I think we can call end of the session. I would like to ask R.K. Radhakrishnan to just say a few words and thank Kieren on behalf of all of us and the group. Yeah. RK, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Kieren, I have one question for you. It is nothing directly connected with the training or anything. See, it is a response from your family. See, they know that you have been running around the whole world. See, while your friends, everybody is working, they are running every month. The money goes to the bank.
Yep.
So, what is the response from your family about your running?
All right. So initially it was very different, and now it's very different. Now my family is one of the among the guys who support me the most. My mom and dad. My dad is very, very involved in everything I do, and he knows everything about the projects I'm doing, about the sponsorship, whether it's the travel. He knows. So my dad's extremely supportive. Mom's supportive as well, and not just my direct, like my mom, dad, and my sister. Even my extended family, my aunt and my uncles and my cousins, and everyone is really excited about the fact that I do this. Like when I'm doing a race, family WhatsApp group is flooded with like hundreds of messages about updates about my race, and everyone's discussing and chatting. So yeah, everyone's really supportive, and I'm glad it makes life a lot easier that I have a family that the guys that support me this way, especially doing something that there is no like path that you can follow, right? And I'm literally just figuring it out and creating my own thing along the way. So the fact that they still support me with all of this is pretty cool.
RK, sorry to interrupt. Maybe this is going to help most of the audience. There are some questions also around that. Kieren, if you can share your Instagram ID and FB, Facebook ID in the chat session, that will be great.
Okay.
There are
it's basically my name, Kieren D'Souza. I'll type it down over there, right? It's on both. It's just that.
Kieren, you will be getting a lot of FB requests, so you will have to accept that from Muscat.
I will for sure.
And one more thing, you were inviting us to Manali. You know, we
Yes.
from Muscat, we go to Malnad, we go to Vagabond, we go as a group. We will be 10 to 15
yes.
people minimum. So you can expect a group from Muscat to Manali.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Like I have 10, 15 people is perfect. Definitely.
Yeah. So not maybe this year, maybe next year, because this year it may not be possible.
Exactly. And I'm not going anywhere anyway, so for sure, anytime.
Thank you so much, Kieren. It was very much informative because many of our runners will be running trails, ultras, maybe next year. That was very informative. Thank you so much for sparing almost 2 hours you were with us. That is wonderful. Very much appreciated on behalf of our KTM Muscat runners.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated you guys having me and giving me this opportunity to have a chat with everyone, and I hope we get to meet in person and not on the over
that
the
will
internet.
happen.
So yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Once again. Good night.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye, Subhash, for that wonderful coordination. Very much appreciated.
Yeah. He had to
Subhash.
chase me around a bit, so thank you so much for that. Yeah.
And Ileraj too. Thank you so much for coordinating.
Thank you, Kieren. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy. Yeah.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good evening.
Thank you. Bye. Good night. Yeah.
You're most welcome to Muscat, Kieren. Everything will be taken care.
Definitely, I will be there. I take these words very seriously.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.